The sun is dropping low over Bethany, and the air already smells like a funeral. Stone jars of water sit untouched by the door of a small house. Inside, the wailing hasn't stopped for 4 days. Outside, in the hillside just past the village, there is a tomb cut into rock, sealed with a stone the size of a grown man's chest. And behind that stone, wrapped in burial cloths, soaked in myrrh and aloes, is a body that has already started to decay. In a few minutes, a man is going to stand in front of that tomb and say 2 words that will empty a grave forever. But before he says them, watch what he does with his face. This is not a story about a magic trick. This is not a story about perfect timing. This is not a story about a miracle you already know the ending to. This is a story about why the most powerful man who ever lived let himself break, in public, over something he was about to fix. His name was Yeshua. You know him as Jesus. And 4 days before he stood at that tomb, he got a message from 2 sisters in this same village, Mary and Martha. Their brother Lazarus was sick, not a little sick, dying sick. Here's what most people miss about that message. The sisters didn't ask Jesus to come. They didn't beg. They didn't demand a miracle. They sent 4 words. Lord, the one you love is sick. That's it. No instructions, no timeline. Just, he'll know what to do with that. You've probably done the same thing, not with a messenger on a dirt road, but with a text you didn't send, a prayer you didn't finish, a need you just let sit there, hoping the person who loves you notices without being told. Mary and Martha did that, and Jesus got the message. And then he did something that, on the surface, looks almost cruel to you and me. He waited 2 more days. On purpose, while a man he loved kept dying. Stay with me, because this is where the story either falls apart or becomes the most human thing you'll ever read about God. Jesus already knew Lazarus would die. He already knew he would raise him. He said as much to his own disciples before he ever left for Bethany. This was not a rescue mission with an uncertain outcome for him. This was a man walking, on purpose, toward a grave he already knew he was going to open. So here's the question this whole story is built around. And it's probably the same question sitting underneath half the prayers you've ever prayed and never gotten an answer to. If God already knows how this ends, why does the middle still hurt so much? Hold that thought, because in a few minutes you're going to watch Jesus arrive at that tomb, the tomb of a friend he is about to raise from the dead. And instead of walking straight to the stone with calm, all-knowing confidence, he's going to stop. He's going to be troubled. He's going to weep. And what that tells you about God is bigger than the miracle itself. Let's go back to the moment the message arrives, because there's more happening here than a sick friend and a slow response. Jesus is across the Jordan when word comes. Bethany is close, maybe 2 miles from Jerusalem, but he's out in the wilderness, away from the religious leaders who are already looking for reasons to arrest him. And into that distance comes a message from 2 women he loves like family. Lord, the one you love is sick. He turns to his disciples and says something strange. This sickness will not end in death. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, no, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. You can imagine the disciples exchanging glances, because they've seen him heal from a distance before. A word spoken miles away, and a servant's fever breaks. So, if this sickness isn't going to end in death, why doesn't he just speak the word right now and be done with it? Instead, he waits. 2 days. Full days. Not an accident, not a delay caused by circumstance. The text is specific about this. He knew. He stayed anyway. Here's the part nobody tells you about this waiting. It wasn't neutral. Every hour Jesus stayed on the far side of that river, Lazarus's body was shutting down in a small house in Bethany, and 2 grieving sisters were watching it happen, wondering where their friend was, wondering if the message even reached him. wondering, the way you might have once, if being loved by someone means they'll actually show up when it counts. Then, finally, Jesus says it. Plainly. No parable, no metaphor. Lazarus is dead. And then this, the line that should stop you cold if you've ever waited on God for anything. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. Glad. Not relieved that the delay is over. Glad that Lazarus died before he arrived, because a raised sick man is impressive. A raised dead man, 4 days gone, is a whole different kind of proof. Proof that changes what people believe about who is standing in front of them. But this got stranger the moment he told the disciples to pack up and go back toward Judea. Because Judea at this point is not safe for Jesus. The religious leaders there have already tried to have him killed. Walking back in that direction isn't just walking toward a grieving family. It's walking toward men who want him dead too. One of the disciples understood exactly what that meant. Thomas, the same one you probably know as Doubting Thomas from a different story entirely, turns to the others and says something you don't expect from him. Not doubt this time. Resolve. Let us also go, that we may die with him. Sit with that for a second. A man walking toward 2 tombs at once, his friends, and possibly his own, and the only person who says out loud what everyone is thinking is the disciple history remembers for doubting. Not exactly what you'd script if you were writing this story yourself. They arrive in Bethany 4 days after Lazarus died. 4 days in that culture mattered more than you might expect. There was a belief, rooted in Jewish tradition of the period, that a person's spirit lingered near the body for 3 days, hoping to return, and left for good on the 4th, once decay had visibly set in. 4 days wasn't just late. It was final. Everyone in that village knew exactly what 4 days meant. This wasn't a coma. This wasn't a mistake. This was over. And that's exactly the moment Jesus chose to walk into. So hold on to where you are right now in this story, because it matters for everything that's about to happen. Jesus already told his disciples Lazarus would live. He already said the death would end in God's glory. He is walking toward that tomb with full knowledge of what he's about to do. Nothing that happens in the next few minutes is a surprise to him. And yet, what you're about to watch him do at that graveside is the part almost nobody talks about in Sunday school. Because knowing the ending didn't stop what happened in the middle. Keep that tension in your mind. You're about to walk straight into it with him. If a story like this is new to you, the parts of the Gospels that don't usually make it into the highlight reel, subscribe now, because you'll want to catch the ones we dig into every week. The details in Scripture that get skipped past too fast are usually where the real weight is hiding. Now, back to Bethany. Because someone is about to meet Jesus on the road, and what she says to him is sharper than anything you'd expect from a grieving sister, Martha doesn't wait at the house. The moment she hears Jesus is close, she gets up and runs to meet him on the road, leaving her sister behind, still sitting in the dark with the mourners. And what she says when she reaches him isn't a greeting. It's an accusation wrapped in grief. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Read that again. This is a woman who loves Jesus, who has watched him heal strangers, and she is telling him to his face that his absence cost her brother his life. There's no soft version of that sentence. It's raw. It's honest. And here's what makes it so unsettling if you really sit with it. She's not wrong. If he had come the moment the message reached him, Lazarus would very likely still be alive. So how does Jesus respond to that kind of accusation from someone he loves? Not with an apology. Not with an excuse. He says, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha, practical, sharp, already grieving, hears that the way you or I probably would. As a comfort line. A Sunday truth. "I know he will rise again in the resurrection. At the last day," she answers, "the way you'd recite something you were taught as a child, true and distant, and not much use to a woman standing next to a 4-day-old grave. That's when Jesus says the line that changes the entire register of this conversation, and maybe changes how you read every unanswered prayer you've ever prayed. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. He's not talking about someday anymore. He's talking about himself. Standing on a dirt road outside Bethany, dust on his sandals, grief on his face, and claiming to be the resurrection itself, present tense, right now, to you and to her both. Martha doesn't argue. She doesn't ask him to prove it. She says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Then she goes back and gets her sister. And this is where the story shifts into something you don't see coming. Mary comes out, and the mourners come with her. The whole crowd that's been sitting with her, wailing, follows her down the road toward Jesus. This wasn't a quiet culture of grief, and you shouldn't picture it that way. Records from this period describe formal, structured mourning in Jewish communities. Professional mourners hired to weep and wail loudly for the dead, sometimes for days at a stretch. This wasn't a few sniffles at a distance. This was noise. This was a village's worth of raw grief moving toward one man on a road. Mary reaches Jesus and falls at his feet. She says the exact same sentence Martha said, word for word. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Here's what most people miss when they read this passage fast. Martha said this standing up, mid-conversation, arguing theology with him. Mary says it on the ground, at his feet, surrounded by the sound of an entire village weeping around her. Same words, completely different weight. And Jesus doesn't respond to Mary the way he responded to Martha. He doesn't correct her. He doesn't teach her. He doesn't say, "I am the resurrection and the life" again. He looks at her. He looks at the crowd weeping around her, and something in him breaks. Here's where you need to slow down, because the next 2 verses contain some of the most misunderstood words in the entire New Testament. The text says that when Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the people who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. That sounds gentle in English. It is not gentle in the original language. The word for troubled is etarachthe. It comes from a root used to describe water stirred up from the bottom. Not a ripple on the surface, but something disturbed all the way down. This wasn't polite sadness. This was Jesus' inner world getting shaken, and you can hear that violence in the word itself if you know where to listen. And deeply moved is even stronger. The Greek is enebrimesato. Outside the Gospels, this word shows up describing the snort of a warhorse before a charge, or a low growl of anger. Some scholars think Jesus wasn't just sad in that moment, he was something closer to furious. Not at Mary. Not at Martha. At death itself. At everything it does to the people he loves, and by extension, to you. Stay with that for a second, because it changes the whole picture. This is not a man calmly walking toward a miracle he already knows the outcome of. This is a man standing in front of a grief he hates, even while holding the power to undo it completely. Then he asks where they've laid the body. And they say, "Lord, come and see." 4 words. The same 4 words the sisters sent when Lazarus first got sick months earlier. A message, not a demand, trusting Jesus to know what to do with it. And what he does next is the 2 words this whole video is named for. Jesus wept. In the original language, it's 1 word, edakrisen. And here's the detail almost nobody points out to you. It's a completely different word from the loud, public wailing used earlier to describe Mary and the mourners. Their grief is kleio, loud, communal, the wailing of an entire village. Jesus' word is quieter, smaller. It describes tears falling, not a scene being made. Picture that contrast for a second. A crowd is wailing loudly enough to fill a village road, and in the middle of all that noise, One man is crying quietly enough that the word for it barely needed a syllable. This is the moment. This is what you were told to watch for at the very beginning of this video. The man who is about to speak 2 words and empty a grave, first quietly, without any performance, breaks. And here's what makes it almost impossible to explain if you try to separate his power from his feelings. He already knows Lazarus is about to walk out of that tomb alive. He said so before he ever left the far side of the Jordan. This is not a man who doesn't know how the story ends, crying because he's afraid of the outcome. This is a man who knows exactly how it ends, and still can't stand in front of that grief without breaking. If that sounds like something you felt before, it's probably because it is. Think about a parent sitting in a hospital waiting room. The doctor has already told them the surgery will likely go fine. They have every reason to believe the good outcome is coming. And they still cry, sitting in that chair, watching their child wheeled away. Not because they don't trust the outcome, but because knowing the ending doesn't cancel what the middle costs you. Jesus already knew the ending. He cried anyway. That's not a contradiction in this story. That's the whole point of it. He asks them to move the stone. Martha protests. By now, she reminds him, there will be a smell. 4 days in that climate does what 4 days does. Jesus reminds her, gently, of what he told her on the road. Did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God? They roll the stone away. And Jesus prays, out loud, not for himself, but so the crowd standing there, and in a strange way so you too can hear it. Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. Then he raises his voice. Not a whisper, not a private word between friends. Lazarus, come forth! And a man who has been dead 4 days, wrapped, sealed, already decaying, walks out of a tomb still bound in burial cloths, and Jesus tells the stunned crowd standing there to take the wrappings off him. The tears and the miracle came from the same man, seconds apart. Not despite each other, not instead of each other, from the same source in him. So why does this story matter 2,000 years later to you? Here's the first thing worth taking with you. Jesus, knowing the outcome, did not cancel what he felt in the moment. He wasn't performing calm. He wasn't skipping past the pain because he already had the ending in his pocket. He let it hit him fully, right there, in front of everyone, before he did anything about it. Here's the second thing. You've probably been taught somewhere along the way that real faith means not crying. That if you trusted God enough, the tears wouldn't come. Look at the man this whole story is about. He knew, with total certainty, that Lazarus would live in minutes. And he still wept. Trusting the ending and feeling the middle are not opposites, no matter what you've been told. They never were. And here's the last one, the one worth sitting with after this video ends. The God you're praying to isn't standing outside your pain waiting calmly for the right moment to fix it. Before Jesus said one word that raised the dead, he cried in front of a crowd over a grief he was seconds away from erasing. If that's who God is at a tomb he was about to empty, that's who God is at whatever you're standing in front of right now, even the things he already knows how to fix for you. This isn't a story about a magic trick you're watching from a distance. It isn't a story about perfect timing you're supposed to admire. It's a story about a God who cries with you before he does anything else. So here's the question. Which part of this hit you hardest? The tears or the 2 words that came right after them? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, because in the end the shortest line in this whole passage says more about who God is than almost anything else in it. Jesus wept.